Hello and welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you join us today for what promises to be an insightful and engaging session about proactive application security in action with real stories and real impact. My name is Beatriz Acosta. I'm an enterprise account manager here at Security Compass, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. So before we dive in, just a quick note, please drop your questions in the QA panel at any time. We'll get to as many as we can at the end. Now, I'm excited to introduce today's speakers. First is Tania Skinner. Started her career as a software engineer, evolving in different roles and leading the evolution of a secure development lifecycle for all product development. Tania is currently the Director of Product Security Assurance at SanDisk. She specializes in secure development, business process engineering, continuous improvement, and the art of herding cats. And joining Tania is also Tim Fogerson, who is a recognized leader in hardware, firmware, and software security assurance with decades of experience managing development teams. And Tim has spent over a decade driving secure development practices at scale. And a disclaimer, Tim and Tania are here as industry experts with 60 plus years of collective experience sharing their insight on driving security initiatives. They are not representing any individual company in this discussion. And with that, let's get started. So, our first topic of the day is barriers to proactive security. And with that in mind, application security seems like a no-brainer. So why is that developers aren't necessarily thinking about it when they are doing development? So Tim, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you went out and talked to a bunch of developers and development managers, you'd get as many answers as you talk to developers or managers. But I think it all boils down to one thing, and that is security isn't special. And what I mean by that is whenever you want or someone wants a development team to do something different, something new, especially if it takes an investment on their part, we all have the same barriers on getting ubiquitous adoption. And the four things you really need to have is, first off, you need to have leadership commitment. And I'm not talking about somebody putting on a slide that security is a pillar. We're talking about leadership across the company taking action to make sure that security assurance and security engineering is a ubiquitous part of the company. Second thing that you need is enablement. So this is the thing that most of the security teams out there spend all their time doing: training, awareness, tools, support. Because a lot of us, especially early on, we need to provide a lot of support to our developers, and in some cases, bandwidth allowed to do these things. And then the third thing is the expectation being set. Even with those first two things, I've seen situations to where, even with those in place, the expectation isn't clearly set that security engineering or security assurance is something that we're going to be doing, and we got to be doing, and you're going to be doing. And then last but not least is holding the development organizations accountable for doing the work. Now, why do you need, why is all that important? Is because development teams are up to their eyeballs already doing the things that their leadership is committed to, has enabled, has set the expectation for, and is holding them accountable for. So if you got something else they need to do, those four tenets need to be in place to get ubiquitous adoption and get that mindset across the organizations in a ubiquitous sort of way.
That's very insightful. Thank you, Tim. And before we move on, we want that the session is very engaging. So we're going to go with our first poll questions for our audience. So the question is, how likely are developers to consider security implications in their work if not explicitly required by a security team? Very likely, somewhat likely, not very likely, not at all likely. So, audience, please help us with your answers. We'll give everyone a little bit of time to think about that. And please remember to pick your top answer. It's only one answer that can be chosen within the polls. And I'm curious in the results, if the results will be consistent with your experience, team. So I am going to be asking you, if that is consistent with what you have seen in your experience. So there you go. So the somewhat likely got a 50% and not very likely is 39%. So what do you think, team, about those results?
Well, I think somewhat likely. I'm a little bit surprised. It's a little bit a greater number than not very likely, especially when the question is posed is from the security team, right? I think uh, it's in my own experience, uh, when it does happen, they're usually local champions, maybe at management level or otherwise, that take it upon themselves to help move the ball forward. So my experience is a little bit different. I think it's if it's just the security team and there's none of those other four things that I talked about coming along with it, my experience has been generally not very likely.
I would agree with that, Tim. That's my experience as well. And I tried to vote. It wouldn't let me vote. I would have gone with not very likely. And I think it's primarily because the developers are rewarded for delivering new features and story points, right? That's what they're generally rewarded for. So them spending precious time on security things, if someone isn't forcing them to or requiring it, in my experience, it's not as likely.
Yeah, the reward is kind of the corollary to accountability, right?
Yep. Yep.
Now, well, that was indeed an interesting answer from the audience, not expected. So, let's move with our next topic, which is finding the right security solution. So, Tim, I understand you have some insights on this one. So, I would like to ask you, can you share what was happening in your organization that triggered the search for a solution like SD Elements?
Sure. So early on, we're going back quite some time, a dozen years or so. We had a security development lifecycle that was a process-based framework sort of thing. And we had a centralized group of security experts that helped teams adopt the SDL, figure out their security objectives, and do threat models and all that sort of stuff. But we have tens of thousands of developers in our organization. So quickly, as adoption grew, we couldn't keep up. So the next thing we did is, well, we can leverage the security experts in the footprint, not on the security team, go through a method to anoint them as product security engineers. I gave them essentially the same roles, responsibilities, and capabilities that our centralized security consulting team had, uh, to help development teams adopt and do a quality job of SDL. And that helped a lot, but still wasn't enough. So we enhanced our security training programs to be a little bit more than, the basics and security first mindset setting, to help grow security expertise across the footprint. Still, wasn't clear that it was going to be enough, and it was obviously a long-term situation. So what we came to is, well, we need to find a way to decrease the amount of security expertise that is required. And I think the tag that we used back then is based on the characteristics of the project, be able to deliver customized security tasks and requirements to development teams with actionable guidance so that a non-security expert could execute and complete those tasks with a high level of quality. So once you have that strategy in mind, you start looking for solutions, and well, that's what Security Compass does. or SD elements. Sorry, that's what they do. You have
It, it is quite interesting that it's counterintuitive, right? Decrease the experts by providing that guidance. So that was quite
well,
interesting.
you will always need experts, and you'll always
Right.
need a lot of experts. But at scale, you not only got to grow your expertise, which is a slow roll, right? But you
Right.
also got to push that demand down, and hopefully at some point you get them down to where they meet. And
Definitely.
and then of course, with SD Elements, we went through the evaluation of looking at building our own. But the real Achilles heel of that is the content. Being able to generate the content, since SD Elements had the software content pretty much out of the box. And we could leverage that for software projects. We could leverage it quite a bit for firmware projects. And that left us with a big nut of hardware, which was non-trivial. It allowed us to get uh, a solution deployed that started pushing the demand for security expertise down pretty quickly. And that was
That's
the Tania show back then.
that's pretty impressive. All right. So now for our next question, Tanya, let me pick up your brain. Most organizations already use a variety of security tools from code scanning to runtime protections. How do you view a security by design platform like SDLMS in that mix? Is it a replacement, complement, or something entirely different?
Oftentimes people want a panacea, right? They want, okay, give me the one solution I need, but it doesn't exist. In the security domain, there's no single tool, there's no single solution, there's no single platform that will do all the things that need to be done. When we think about security by design, we have to have security requirements, security architecture, security implementation, validation, all the fun things. And there's no single tool that will do that. Now, your code scanning tools are absolutely necessary. Your runtime protections, your compiler hardening, all those things are necessary, and you have to have those tools and you have to do those things. But they're all solving different pieces of the puzzle. And security SD Elements is absolutely another piece of the puzzle. I've never seen a static code analysis tool scan the code and say, oh, you need secure boot. Or, oh, you need to make sure that you have rollback protection in your upgrade mechanism. So the code scanning tools are going to tell you what you've implemented, and they're looking for a specific set of problems, buffer overflows and things like that. But they're not going to highlight to you, you have a clear requirement or design miss. There's a security control you need to implement, right? So SD Elements in interrogating the user really about what is it you're trying to build and implement, it then assigns tasks, including tasks such as you need this security controller feature. You have to design this capability in. So it solves a different problem than, say, a static code analysis software or your compiler hardening flags or other tools like that. So there is no single tool or solution. What you effectively need is a suite of solutions. And SD Elements plays a critical role in that it's assessing what you're trying to build and establish, and it's giving you good guidance from as early as requirement specification all the way through your implementation and validation on things that you need to do.
That's great. So we have another quick poll for our audience. So the next question is, what is the most important factor when choosing an AppSec solution for developers? Integration with developer tools, actionable developer-friendly guidance, automation and scalability, support for security standards and policies, ease of onboarding and use. So, audience, up to you again. And don't think too long. Often, first impressions are right. And I'm hearing over here in these answers some of the points that you guys have made already in the decision for choosing XE elements, actually. Um, So let's give a couple of more seconds for the audience to answer. Okay, I think we got it. So, first one now is actionable developer friendly guidance. You mentioned it, Tania. So, what do you think about that?
Actually, I'm very pleasantly surprised. This absolutely reflects my thoughts as I looked at these answers, is that all of these are important. Every single one of them is important. And I'm not surprised that the actionable developer friendly guidance kind of bubbled to the top. But if you look at the distribution here, they're all roughly equivalent, right?
Right.
And a lot of it's going to depend on your organization and your organization's challenges and problems and where you struggle the most. But the actionable developer friendly guidance being the number one is not a surprise, and I agree with that. Just because security is still considered kind of a black magic thing, right? And the reality is our developers aren't coming out of college with strong backgrounds or understandings of how to integrate security into product development and design because our university systems are not where they need to be, in my opinion. The curriculums should have security embedded into each and every engineering course, every single one, and they don't. It's often treated as a separate kind of optional module you can take, security in one semester. Those of us who work in the field know that that doesn't work. So the fact that our developers need us to give them guidance as they enter the workplace and they're developing products and services on how do I make this secure is not a surprise. And this is where actually SD Elements is very strong. The knowledge base is quite good. The content you get is quite good, and it's generally much better than what a lot of us have internally within our companies.
100% agree. Absolutely agree with everything she just said.
That's great to hear. All right, so our next topic is overcoming hesitation and driving adoption. And the first question, I'm going to go with you, Tania, again. When you first introduced SD Elements, what kind of resistance or pushback did you encounter from within the organization?
So what's interesting is the biggest roadblock and pushback did not come from when we actually introduced it. It was just in selecting it and choosing it and purchasing it.
Mm,
So one of the most important things you need to do is, first of all, recognize who are your change agents and who are your experts within your organization. And for something like this, we're telling our entire engineering community, we're looking at a tool that's going to give us expert guidance on how to make our products more secure. Well, there's a lot of skepticism around that, right? Oh, there's going to be some tool that tells me what I need to do to securely engineer a product, especially when you're working with engineers at a very high level of expertise. So our biggest challenge, in fact, was getting our own security engineers on board with it as we started to evaluate and select tools. So we had to have the security engineers themselves believe that the guidance was good and that it was going to result in better products. And to do that, we actually dove deep into the knowledge base. So I got together a team of security engineers and we decided to model 3 representative products that represented a typical type of development effort we did. We modeled them in SD Elements, and then it spit out all sorts of task assignments with knowledge base action items. Do this, do this, do this, etc. And I actually assigned every one of those tasks to a security engineer to evaluate. And I gave them a scale that they had to evaluate it under. One of the items was it's great or it's good as is. Sorry, I think the items were it was great, it was good enough as is, it was okay but needs work, or it was catastrophically bad advice. That was our scale. And these security engineers were each assigned a task and they had to rate them. And one of the biggest challenges was where the security engineer is like, well, it's good advice, but it's missing this or that. And we can't use it. I said, really? I go, okay, so it's good advice, but it's missing this or that. Show me your documented guidance that you give teams today on this same task. Oh, well, I don't have that. Okay, so you don't have documented guidance on it. No. So, I just tell them when I find out that they need that advice. Okay, so if you don't have documented guidance, and this is documented guidance, isn't it better to give the teams this than nothing at all? And they would think about it and they go, yeah. And so we actually tracked all of those. And then we captured where they said it's missing this or it's missing that. We fed that information back to the Security Compass knowledge base team. And we actually sat down and had a meeting with them on here's all the ones that we think need, minor modifications. Here's ones that we think are just incorrect. And we had a great meeting and discussion. In the end, the vast majority of the tasks were rated as good enough as is, which was a huge win. And it made huge progress in getting the security experts themselves on board with, yeah, this is going to help us because I don't have time to document all this stuff. And what they have documented is better than what I have documented. So it accomplished two things. It built the confidence in the knowledge base with the internal security experts that the whole organization trusted and followed. But then it also showed us that we could have an excellent relationship with the vendor and continuously improve the knowledge base when we found there were problems. Because Security Compass was very responsive to our feedback and actually did go. And when we did identify that there were gaps, they plugged them. And it gave us the confidence in the vendor relationship so that we would move forward. And once I had those security experts on board, bringing the actual developers and business units on board was a piece of cake. The big part is the security experts, getting them to confidently stand up and say, this is good. It's going to help us. If you follow this guidance, we will make better products. And that was our biggest challenge.
Yeah, and underlying all that, kind of a macro level, up clicking it, that I need to remind everyone that this represented a significant shift in strategy on how we did security assurance at the company, going from a process-based framework, SDL, to a task-based framework, requirements framework like SD Elements. It's not 9 day, but it was a massive shift in the approach to security assurance at the company, and we're talking organization of tens of thousands of engineers. So Tania's method was to get the players on board with that strategic shift, set at a 10,000 foot level anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, to get the buy-in right from those teams so you don't get that resistance once that solution was ready to be implemented. So yeah, no, that's very insightful. So the next question, what approaches have worked best for you to get developers to embrace a new security tool like SD Elements and make it part of their daily workflow? I think you already touched on some of these ones, but would you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Sure. So, there's actually a whole field of study called knowledge management. And in the field of knowledge management, it talks about how as you're trying to share best practices and build knowledge and awareness, what you really want to do is get the content in the flow. And there's this term in the flow. What that means is if there's an existing process, you want to integrate into that. Whatever you do, don't tell people you've got to step out of your standard work process and go get this stuff over here because it will fail. They stay within their process of what they're doing. And that's no different for the security knowledge and the security tasks and the security information. You need to integrate into wherever the developers are working. If your developers are working Jira, if they live, eat, and breathe every day, I'm in Jira, I've got my tickets that are assigned, we have our Scrum meetings, etc., and everything I do is managed through Jira, you need to get that content into Jira. So integration into your developer's processes and tool chain is absolutely essential and critical. Don't make them leave their area of work and where they're working to go get information. You push that information into that. And for me, I think that's probably the most important thing is that integration. Push those action items, those tasks into wherever they're managing their functional development tasks.
That's really great. And how did the security team adapt to SD Element? What was the most significant change they had to navigate during the adoption process?
I think the most significant change was really that first step in really trusting in the knowledge base. That was huge. Trusting in the knowledge base. They had to believe that the tasks assigned. By default, you have to believe the tasks assigned are good. And then the other aspect we had to do is really have a mechanism for a team to be able to review with the security engineer where they think it doesn't make sense or they don't think it's applicable. Sometimes things are assigned that aren't applicable. You have to have a mechanism for that. And you have to have a way to have that reviewed. So if I recall correctly, we had actually implemented a mechanism in the way we assigned the tasks such that the developer could give a feedback of, I think this is not applicable. And that would trigger a review with the security engineer. Because what you want to avoid is where the developer says it's not applicable because they don't understand it, right? And they don't realize how important it is or how relevant it is. And that happens a lot. So we don't want to just give the developers the ability to call something NA without any type of oversight from a security expert. So we implemented a mechanism for them to flag something as, I think this is not applicable. And that triggered a review with the security engineer who would then either explain to them why it was applicable. And in some cases, we would actually augment the knowledge base then, right? Explain to them why it's applicable, or would review with them and say, you know what, I think you're right. This is not applicable. And that on the back end, we had occasional reviews with our team where we would look at everything that was actually flagged as not applicable, and we would revisit the assignment logic. And sometimes we would make adjustments to the assignment logic because you definitely want to manage the noise, right? And anytime you assign a team tasks that they look at and spend time reading and it turns out it's not applicable, you've got noise, and noise impacts productivity and it undermines confidence. So we had mechanisms in place for developers to flag that a task was not applicable. We had a mechanism in place for a security engineer to review and validate. And then we had a mechanism in place for our centralized team to see what came through as not applicable that perhaps we needed to adjust assignment logic or something like that.
That makes me think that in order to implement any security tool, you need processes around, right? And that's what you're describing. It's
Yep.
not only the tool, it's not only technology, but also the processes and the people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to remember tools implement process at the end of the day.
Exactly. So our next topic is business impact of security by design. And we're going to go and start with a poll here. So what benefits are you most interested in achieving by adopting a proactive solution for application security? Fewer vulnerabilities in production, less friction between security and development teams, faster development cycles, improved compliance with regulations, ability to scale a resource-constrained application security team. So let's give the audience some time again. And I'm really curious about this one. Let's see what the results will be. Any guesses? Don't say anything, but I do have my my forecasting here. Let's wait for a couple of more seconds. This is our final poll, our third poll and final. And yeah, get to answer. All right, so improve compliance with regulation. Oh, sorry. What is the first one?
Ability to scale.
Oh, ability to scale a resource constraint, ability to secure. Yeah, the answers were like all put together at the beginning, I guess. But it is, I'm assuming that it is ability to scale resource constrained application security team, right?
Actually, I think
Yeah,
the first one is it fewer vulnerabilities?
Vulnerabilities in production.
Yeah.
That's what I guess it would be. And sorry that got
confused. Fewer vulnerabilities. Okay, all right.
But the answer is yeah, all of the above, right? Really. But at the end of the day, why do we do all of this, right? We do it to improve the security resiliency and reduce the security risk of our products, which means fewer vulnerabilities escaping. So assuming that everyone voted, focusing on that bit, I would agree with this. But just like the previous poll, to really to be able to accomplish that efficiently with a high level of quality of execution and so on and so forth, you need all these other things too, right? None of it goes away.
100%, 100%. And then that's one of the value drivers why people are buying as the elements, right? To try to get fewer vulnerabilities in the production environment. Um, all right. So without giving away any secrets, what would you say are the most notable benefits you have seen? And do you have any stats you can share?
Well, I think this one I was gonna take, but it has Tanya's name on the syllabus here, but I'll take it anyway. I would have to say that probably one of the biggest surprises that we had was feedback directly from the developers. Um, they had many developers were having, shall we say, come to deity of your choice moments as they start to understand that a lot of the things they did and have done their entire careers, project in, project out, were creating situations uh, of, of where there could be vulnerabilities and potentially exploits for those vulnerabilities. And that's an awareness beyond, well, security's a good idea and we really need to do it, protect our grandmas, all that kind of business. But it's a click down of a holy mackerel. I've been doing this wrong forever. And I had no idea that what I did or what I wasn't doing could cause a security problem. And Tanya, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that was my experience as well. The biggest benefit was really just the eye opening that a lot of the developers had on, oh, I didn't know that I shouldn't do that. Oh, I didn't know that that created a security weakness. Countless developers would come up and say, I had no idea that that was important, and I've been doing this for years. So that to me is the win, right? When you
Yeah,
get the person who's not the security expert all of a sudden starting to see the light and seeing where, oh, I had no idea that doing it this way could be exploited in this particular method. That was huge. That was
yeah,
huge.
I would say it did more to establish a security first mindset across the development organization than all the marketing campaigns that
Mhm.
we engaged in because it became real for them. Right? It became very, very real for the developers, and it moved the ball far, far forward as far as security first mindset. And it's been an interesting ride, that's for sure.
Yeah, and actually, if I can add to that, there's a common misconception I see amongst the developer community, and that is this belief that security vulnerabilities can only exist in your security controls and the implementation of your security controls, like your access control model. Oh, a security vulnerability could only be in that. No, a security vulnerability could exist in any line of code or API, regardless of the functionality that that code is delivering. It's just a path in. And that was one of the big ahas that we saw with the developers, is especially these developers who thought, well, I don't do the security control, so nothing I could do could be a security vulnerability. And they quickly learned in getting assigned these tasks and seeing how to code something or implement something, because SD Elements actually includes code snippets, which is fantastic. They could actually see, oh, I didn't know that my coding this, function that has nothing to do with security could actually be a security vulnerability. And that was a huge aha. And I still see that perception in the industry today. I can't have security vulnerabilities in my code because I'm not coding security controls. That's a complete misconception. Any line of code can be a security vulnerability.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
during this time period we're talking about, I also ran product security incident response for the company, and I can tell you in analyzing these escapes, these vulnerabilities that we saw, though there were sometimes vulnerabilities in security controls, but it was actually pretty rare because those controls usually get a lot more
Mhm.
scrutiny
Yes.
than the just ubiquitous features. So the vast majority of the security vulnerabilities that we saw weren't anywhere near a security feature or a security control. And yeah, and a lot of people, as Tony says, to this day don't really grok that. And it was a lot of huge moments as we rolled this out, and teams started to learn that.
And so definitely the awareness of security, and of course the build up of knowledge within those security teams when they were getting that guidance, right? And I think one of the biggest things about SDLMS is you get that guidance and then you implement it right away. So it sticks in you, right? It is knowledge that you are building in your head as a
Well,
developer.
well, certainly if you're working on the same kind of programs, it at some point it's going to be, oh, well, I already did that, so here, let me go
Exactly.
upload my evidence. I didn't see the task yet in Jira or whatever, but I already did it. And here we
Exactly.
go. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's really getting to the security as a special thing, to where it's just a part of your development brain, just like performance and memory optimization and all these things that uh, developers have learned are important and they focus on, and it's making security part of that group.
Absolutely. All right, and now for our last section is the takeaways. So the last question of the day, before we go into the questions from the audience. So before we get, what is the advice that you would give to others who are just starting out with a proactive approach to application security? So let's start with you, Tanya.
At the end of the day, if you're deploying a solution like SD Elements or anything, any new tool, you're effectively deploying an engineering process improvement initiative, right? It is a process improvement initiative. And that brings in people. And you have to bring the people on board and get them on board with what you're trying to accomplish. There's so many different ways to deploy a process improvement initiative, and you have to look at the organization you're working with and what is the culture of that organization. There's some organizations where they will respond well to a tops-down mandate from a VP. A VP stands on the forum and says, "Thou shalt do this," right? And in some organizations, people will, okay, they'll get in line and go do it. There's other organizations where it doesn't matter what the VP says. It's all about what these, lead change agents or, the most influential engineers say. And if those most influential engineers aren't bought in, you will not be successful, right? So, and then there's some organizations where you really do need a hybrid approach. You need the mandate from above, and you need to get on board the people who are active in the trenches, who all the engineers look up to and respect and will follow their lead. I find I tend to always go for some type of hybrid approach to try to get both angles. But in the end, you have to make sure that the people themselves believe in it and they have confidence and it's going to help them solve a problem and then it's going to give the right guidance and the right solution. So you really need to look at what is the culture of your organization. And me personally, I like to go back before I deploy any initiative, especially if it's with a new organization. And I like to look at what initiatives have been deployed in the past, which ones were successful, why were they successful in their approach, which ones failed, and why did they fail? You need to look at that and understand that. But SD Elements, you're deploying a process improvement initiative. Understand the culture, understand the environment, understand the movers and the shakers and who the change agents are. You have to get on board and then design your implementation around that. And don't try to solve all the problems at once. Be very targeted and focused.
It's great advice. It gets right back to the security as a special. It is a process improvement initiative, and you know what? Go talk to folks in your organization that have been very successful in that, and find out what they did. For me personally, and how I spent a lot of my time back in the day was with that executive sponsorship, right? Because all these things that Tanya talked about become a lot easier if you have active executive sponsorship of your initiative. And again, that's more than just putting something on a pillar. It's active. Know that they're serious about it. Know they're going to hold folks accountable for it. And this is what we need to do. And all the mechanics and I got the tactics to do that successfully is like what Tania talked about.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic information about, your experience of implementing the elements. We have a couple of questions from the audience. The first one is for you, Tania. You have done this across multiple companies now. What are the most common challenges you have encountered across them?
Big shout out to my buddy Bruce.
Hey, Bruce.
Who put the question in there. Probably the biggest challenge is there's no way that, this knowledge base has anything that we don't know about or anything that's good. It really is the biggest challenge is the security experts and getting the security experts themselves on board with it and getting them to trust in the knowledge base, at least in my experience. That was the biggest challenge, getting them to trust in it and believe in it. And then there is once you get that on board, the second challenge is you got to find a way, excuse me, to integrate it into the developer's work stream and workflow. It's got to show up with their functional development tasks. Security is just more tasks you have to do with a slightly different focus, right? But in the end, you have security requirements, you have security design and architectural implementations that have to happen. You've got to implement, you have to validate, right? And then there's hardening. Security is just it's a different perspective on products functional requirements and what it needs to do and how you evaluate it and look at it. So get the trust in the knowledge base and then integrate it into the developer's tool chain and mechanism and find ways to make it not disruptive and help show the value and the benefit to the product teams.
Great. Another question, I find this one interesting. How ready is SD Elements to use out of the box today versus when we started when it back in the day?
That's a really good question. To be honest, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I haven't stayed on top of the latest releases, etc. I have to imagine that it's probably got way more capabilities than it did back in the day. I know it has more integration capabilities, but I can't really answer that one because I haven't in the very recent past looked at some of the new features and capabilities.
And if you guys are interested in seeing all of the capabilities, we are open to get you a demo session at any time. So we will be providing a link later on. All right.
And I will, but just one more comment onto that. I mean, back in the day, we did a big investment in making sure it was ready because we had so many skeptics. So we did a big investment in making sure it was ready. And in the end, it was ready and we did it. And we integrated and it was successful and it was a game changer for us.
Well, yeah. And one thing, we did the pilots for software. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this has never happened in decades of managing where the pilot teams, after we got done, said, okay, so when's this going in production? We gave a date because we had schedule and we had all these things,
We launched it early.
And they said, no, we want it now. And they're like,
yeah.
So, I looked at Tania, we looked at each other, we looked at the team, and it's like we chose Adventure and we launched it and it was great.
I forgot about that. I forgot we actually pulled in our pilot end date because the teams wanted to use it in a production capacity.
Yeah.
We satisfied the pilot criteria we had acceptance and success criteria that we had to meet. And we met that criteria way earlier than we thought we would. So we pulled in the pilot and we launched it earlier. I totally forgot about that. Thanks, Tim, for that reminder.
Yeah, it was, well, I'll never forget that because I've never seen that with an enterprise class tool in my entire life. And SD Elements was it. And I haven't seen it since.
All right, we have 1 or 2 minutes left. We have this last question, I think. What do you say to management that isn't convinced in the importance of security and see it as an impediment to acting like a startup and being agile?
Well, what I would say is, what is your risk profile? And it depends on what your product is, where it's going, and how much risk are you willing to assume? Because bad things can happen. We've seen million and billion-dollar vulnerabilities. There have been vulnerabilities that essentially have killed small companies. We've seen that happen. So what is your risk tolerance for that? Because you don't have to boil the ocean to get yourself a strong foundation and help minimize that risk for what you can afford. But they need to understand what their risk of security vulnerabilities might be and what impact is that going to have to their startup, and then also understand what the minimum, I guess, that could be done to help mitigate that risk. So it's really a management question, getting them the data, and them deciding what their risk tolerance is for their startup and moving super fast.
But I think there's also there's another factor there, and that is that the industry itself is really pushing back on lack of security, really as even an option. We have legislation out of Europe, and then there's legislation coming in the U.S., the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark program, which is going to be launching in a pilot, and eventually it'll be mandatory. But there's legislation that's now going to require certain security features and capabilities and disclosures for any IoT type, and the definitions for what devices are in scope are so broad that they could effectively include any type of technology device or software service. So I think we're getting to the stage where it's not going to be an optional company can decide what risk they're going to take on in all cases. In many cases, it's going to be, if you want to sell that product in Europe, it's got to have this capability has to be labeled with this. You have to provide security documentation with your product documentation, et cetera. And that's going to happen in the US eventually as well. So you can decide, we're not going to do it now. We'll wait till we're required, but then you will be behind. You want to be that first product to launch that can have the sticker on the box that says we satisfy US Cyber Trust Mark. If you're able to do that, you potentially have a competitive market advantage. So at some point, you won't be able to just leave it to your leadership. At some point, it's just the cost of doing business. And I look forward to the day when we get there.
Which it's funny. It should have been. It's a quality attribute, just like everything else. It's like it's amazing that it's taking so long to get there, right?
Yeah,
we're getting there. We're getting there. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found the discussion valuable and took away some practical insights into scaling secure development practices. And a big thank you to Tania and to team. We truly appreciate your thoughtful perspectives shared in today's session. A link to the recording will be shared shortly. And if you're interested in a closer look at how SD Elements works, there is a link up now to book a free demo if you want to see all of the new features. So don't miss that. And for more information, visit our website, securitycompass.com. And thanks again. We look forward to seeing you at a future session. Take care.